Okay, so have you ever had one of those moments like when you really want to understand something new,
Hmm.
something important,
Hmm.
maybe for work, or just because you are curious about it
Hmm.
and you find yourself just like drowning in articles and research papers and, those long PDFs that you have to scroll through forever?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
You just wish that somebody could just like get to the point and tell you what you actually need to know.
Exactly. Cut through the noise.
Yeah, without making you feel like your brain is going to explode from information overload.
Right.
I think we've all been there.
Absolutely. It's a universal experience.
In today's world, we are just bombarded with information from every direction.
Yeah. And it can be exhausting to
Yeah.
try to make sense of it all.
Well, that is exactly what we do here on the deep dive.
That's right.
We take all those sources that you send to us and we do the heavy lifting for you.
We distill it down.
Exactly. We extract the key insights, the surprising facts, the things that will make you go, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
The aha moments.
And we present it all to you in a way that's not only informative, but hopefully a little bit entertaining.
We try to have fun with it.
For sure. And today's deep dive is all about leadership.
One of my favorite topics.
Oh, me too. And you've given us some really fantastic material to work with this time around.
We've got a study guide, some excerpts, a great analysis, and even a full PDF.
Yeah, it's like a treasure trove of leadership wisdom.
It is. And it's going to be a really solid foundation for our discussion today.
I think so. And our mission today is to get to the bottom of situational leadership too.
Ah, yes, a classic.
A really influential approach to leadership, and one that I think a lot of people are curious about.
For good reason. It's very practical.
So we're not just going to summarize the material, we're going to have a real conversation about it.
We're going to dig deep.
We're going to unpack the complexities, we're going to explore the nuances, and we're going to give you those aha moments that make those complex ideas click.
I love that.
Okay, so let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Situational leadership 2. What is the big idea here? What is it all about?
Well, at its core, situational leadership 2 is all about adapting your leadership style.
Okay, so not just sticking to one way of doing things.
Exactly. One size does not fit all.
Right.
You have to adjust your approach based on the individual you are working with and their development level.
Their development level.
Yes, on a specific task.
Ah, so it's not just about the person in general.
No, it's about how ready they are to handle a particular task.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that readiness depends on their competence and commitment.
So how skilled they are at the task and how motivated they are to do it.
Exactly.
So are you saying that there is no such thing as the best leadership style?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
That's pretty radical. I think a lot of people have this idea that, some people are just born leaders.
Right. But this model throws that idea out the window.
It says that effectiveness as a leader is all about the context.
The situation, the task, the individual you're working with, all of that matters.
And one of our sources puts it really well. They say,
Oh, yeah.
nothing is so unequal as the equal treatment of unequals.
I love that quote.
It's so true.
It means that treating everyone the same way is not fair, and it's definitely not effective.
Right. You wouldn't expect someone who's brand new to a task to perform at the same level as someone who's been doing it for years.
Exactly. You wouldn't coach a professional athlete the same way you coach a beginner.
No, you wouldn't. And that's why situational leadership is so powerful.
It takes those differences into account.
Now, I noticed that we're talking about situational leadership too.
Yes,
Is there like a version 1?
there is.
What's the difference?
Well, like any good model, situational leadership has evolved over time
Oh, so it's been refined and updated.
based on research and practical
So
experience.
2 is like the upgraded version.
You could say that.
Okay, so adaptable leadership tailored to individual needs on specific tasks.
That's the foundation.
Got it. Now let's talk about the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
The 4 basic leadership styles that this model outlines.
Right. What are they and how do they work in practice?
So these 4 styles are based on 2 key leadership behaviors:
Okay.
directive behavior and supportive behavior.
I see.
Directive behavior is all about giving clear instructions, setting expectations, monitoring progress,
Very structured.
right? And supportive behavior is about listening, offering encouragement, helping with problem solving.
More about building relationships.
Yes, yes. And the 4 leadership styles we're going to talk about are different combinations of these 2 behaviors.
Okay, so tell me about the first style.
So the first style is called directing,
Directing.
and it's often referred to as S1.
S1 for directing.
This style is high on directive behavior
Okay.
and low on supportive behavior.
So it's very much a tell them what to do and make sure they do it kind of approach.
Exactly. The leader provides very specific instructions and closely supervises the work.
And when would this style be the most appropriate to use?
Well, think about it. When someone is brand new to a task,
Okay.
they lack the competence, the skills, right? They're just starting out.
And they might also lack the confidence.
So they're a little bit unsure of themselves.
Exactly. In those situations, they need clear guidance and structure.
They need someone to tell them exactly what to do.
And that's what directing does.
Now, our sources give an example from the 1 Minute Manager,
Oh, yes.
talking with Larry McKenzie, who's learning about HR training.
I remember that.
And the quote is,
Let me see if I can find it.
"The leader provides specific instructions and closely supervises task accomplishment."
There it is.
And McKenzie even said that he felt like an extension of the 1 Minute Manager at that point.
He was being very closely directed.
But I imagine there's a risk here.
Oh, absolutely.
If you stay in directing mode for too long, what happens?
Well, you can stifle the person's growth.
Right.
They become too dependent on you.
They don't learn to think for themselves.
Exactly. So it's important to know when to shift to a different style.
Okay. So directing is good for beginners, but you don't want to overuse it.
Exactly.
What about style number 2?
Style number 2 is coaching,
Coaching or
S2.
S2?
And this style is high in both directive and supportive behaviors.
So it's a bit more balanced.
Yes, the leader is still providing direction and monitoring progress,
Okay.
but they're also starting to explain their decisions.
They're involving the person more?
Yes, they're soliciting input and they're offering encouragement and support.
So it's like you're guiding them, but you're also helping them to develop their own understanding.
Precisely, you're teaching them to fish rather than just giving them a fish.
I like that analogy.
And one of our sources uses this great example of Mrs. McBride helping Tom with his math.
Oh, I remember that.
She says to him, "Tom, I want you to do problems 1 through 3, and I'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes to talk to you about your answers.
Okay.
If we work on this together, I know you're going to get better at math."
So she's giving him direction, but she's also being very encouraging.
Exactly. She's showing him that she believes in him.
And that she's there to support him.
Yes, and that's a key aspect of coaching.
But I guess there's a potential pitfall here, too.
There is.
What if you don't move away from coaching at the right time?
That's a good question.
What could happen?
Well, the person might not develop true independence.
Right. They might still rely on you too much.
Exactly. So it's important to find that sweet spot between providing enough support and encouraging self-reliance.
That's a delicate balance.
It is.
Okay, so we've got directing for beginners, coaching for those who are developing their skills.
Yes.
What's next?
The third style is supporting,
Supporting.
also known as S3.
S3 for supporting.
And this style is low in directive behavior and high in supportive behavior.
Okay, so the leader is taking a step back.
Yes. They're not giving as many instructions.
They're letting the person take more ownership?
Exactly. They're focusing on facilitating the person's efforts, offering encouragement, and sharing in decision-making.
So it's more of a collaborative partnership.
It is.
And when would this style be most appropriate?
Well, think about someone who has the skills to do the task.
They're competent.
Yes, but they might still lack some confidence,
Okay.
or they might be hesitant to take full responsibility.
So they need a little bit of a nudge.
They do. They need someone to believe in them, to support them, to help them overcome their doubts.
And that's where supporting comes in.
Precisely.
Now, one of our sources has a great quote from Cindy Murrow, who works in finance with the 1 Minute Manager.
Oh, yeah. What does she say?
She says, "The 1 Minute Manager never tells me what to do, but together we arrive at the direction we want to take."
That's a perfect illustration of supporting.
It is. They're working together as partners.
But there's a potential risk here, too.
What's that?
Providing too much support. You don't want to create a situation where the person becomes too reliant on you.
Right. You want to empower them to stand on their own 2 feet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's important to strike that balance between support and challenge.
Okay, and that brings us to the final leadership style,
Yes.
which is
Delegating.
delegating, or S4.
Delegating. This style is low in both directive and supportive behaviors.
Wow, so the leader's really stepping back here.
They're essentially handing over responsibility to the individual.
So the person is pretty much on their own?
Not completely on their own,
Okay.
but they have a lot of autonomy.
And when does this style make the most sense?
When the individual has demonstrated both high competence and high commitment.
They know what to do and they're motivated to do it.
Exactly, they're your star players.
And the 1 Minute Manager uses this style with John DeLapa, who works in technical operations. And he tells DeLapa, "Keep me informed, but that's your area. You run with the ball."
You're the technical expert around here.
So he's giving him a lot of freedom.
He is. He's trusting DeLapa to get the job done.
Okay, so just to recap,
Yeah.
we've got directing for beginners,
Ah,
coaching for those who are developing their skills,
right.
Supporting for those who are capable but maybe a little hesitant,
Hmm.
and delegating for those who are highly competent and committed.
That's a great summary.
But I think the real challenge here is knowing which style to use when.
That's where it gets tricky.
That's where the situational part comes in.
Right.
How do you figure out which style is the best fit for a particular person and a particular task?
Well, that's where the concept of diagnosing development level comes in.
Diagnosing development level.
Yes, it's about assessing the individual's competence.
Their knowledge and skills.
Yes, in relation to the specific task.
Okay.
And also their commitment.
Their confidence and motivation.
Exactly.
And one of our sources makes a really important point here.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
They say you cannot determine a person's competence or commitment in general, only his or her development level to accomplish a certain goal.
I love that.
So it's all about the task.
Exactly. Someone might be highly competent in one area,
Right.
but a complete novice in another.
So their development level can vary depending on what they're being asked to do.
Precisely.
And based on this task-specific assessment,
Yes.
we can identify 4 development levels.
4 level.
Okay, tell me about them.
So the first level is D1,
E1.
and this is the enthusiastic beginner.
Enthusiastic beginner.
They have low competence for the task.
They're still learning the ropes.
Yes, but they have high commitment.
They're eager to learn.
Exactly. They're excited to take on the challenge.
But they need a lot of guidance.
They do.
So which leadership style would be best for a D1?
Directing S1.
Okay, that makes sense.
You need to give them clear instructions and close supervision.
What about D2?
D2 is the disillusioned learner.
Disillusioned learner.
They've gained some competence,
They're starting to get it.
but their commitment has waned.
Oh, so they're not as enthusiastic as they used to be.
Maybe they've hit a few roadblocks.
Or the task is harder than they thought it would be.
Exactly, and they might be feeling a little discouraged.
So how do you lead a D2?
This is where coaching comes in, S2.
Nice. 2?
You need to provide both direction and support.
Okay.
You need to continue to guide them,
Give them clear instruction.
but you also need to encourage them.
Help them build their confidence back up.
Exactly.
And what about D3?
D3 is the reluctant contributor.
Reluctant contributor.
Or you could call them the capable but cautious performer.
Capable but cautious.
They have moderate to high
Oh,
competence.
they have the skills.
They do, but their commitment is variable.
It goes up and down.
Yes, they might lack confidence.
Okay.
They might be hesitant to take full responsibility.
Or they might just need a little bit of motivation.
Exactly.
And what's the best leadership style for a D3?
Supporting S3. You
Yeah.
need to step back from giving instructions
Okay.
and focus on facilitating their efforts.
Empowering them.
Yes, offering encouragement, validating their abilities.
And finally, we have D4.
D4 is the peak performer,
Peak performer.
or the self-reliant achiever.
Self-reliant achiever.
They have both high competence and high commitment.
You're the all-stars.
They're the people you can trust to get things done.
And what's the best way to lead a D4?
Delegating S4.
S4.
You give them the ball and let them run with it.
You don't need a lot of supervision.
No, they can handle it.
No, one of our sources really emphasizes that everyone has the potential to reach that D4 level.
Absolutely everyone.
I love that.
It's such a positive message.
It is. It's all about growth and development.
And one of the quotes says, everyone has peak performance potential. You just need to know where they are coming from and meet them there.
That's so powerful.
It means that we shouldn't judge people based on where they are right now.
Right.
We should focus on helping them reach their full potential.
And situational leadership is a framework for doing just that.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked about the 4 leadership styles.
Yes.
We've talked about the 4 development levels.
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually match the style to the level in practice?
Well, it's actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
The D1 enthusiastic beginner needs S1 directing.
Right.
The D2 disillusioned learner needs S2 coaching.
Makes sense.
The D3 reluctant contributor needs S3
Oh.
supporting, and the D4 peak performer needs S4 delegating.
So the levels and styles line up pretty neatly.
They do.
And one of our sources mentions this concept of a performance curve.
Oh, yes.
What is that all about?
Well, the performance curve is a visual way of showing how a leader's emphasis should shift as an individual develops.
Okay.
So when someone is new to a task, you start with a lot of directive behavior.
You give them clear instructions, you monitor their progress closely, and then as they gain competence and commitment,
Yes.
you start to decrease the amount of direction.
And increase the amount of support.
So it's a gradual shift
It is.
from high direction, low support,
To low direction, high
but
support.
eventually to low direction, low support.
Exactly.
So it's not about picking one style and sticking with it
No, it's about constantly adjusting your approach.
based on the person's development.
Precisely.
So what are the key skills that a leader needs to be effective at situational leadership?
Well, the first skill is flexibility. You need to be able to use all 4 leadership styles.
Comfortably.
Yes. And you need to be able to switch between them smoothly.
Adapting to the situation.
Right.
And what's the second skill?
The second skill is diagnosis.
Diagnosis.
You need to be able to accurately assess the individual's competence and commitment.
On a specific task.
Yes, remember, it's always task-specific.
Okay, so you need to be a good observer.
Yes, and a good listener.
And what's the third skill?
The third skill is contracting.
Contracting.
This is about having open and productive conversations with your team members
Okay.
to agree on their development level and the best leadership style.
So it's not just the leader making a decision.
No, it's a collaborative process.
And one of our sources really emphasizes that point.
Oh, yeah.
They say situational leadership is not something you do to people, but something you do with people.
It's a partnership.
Exactly.
And contracting usually starts with setting clear goals.
SMART goals.
Yes, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
So everyone knows what they're working towards.
Right. And then both the leader and the individual analyze the individual's development level.
In relation to those goals.
Yes. And they have a conversation about it.
To make sure they're on the same page.
Exactly.
And if there's a difference of opinion about the development level, what happens then?
Well, our sources suggest that you should usually defer to the individual's assessment
Interesting.
and agree to monitor their progress closely.
So you're giving them the benefit of the doubt,
You're trusting them to know themselves best.
but you're also holding them accountable.
Yes.
And once you've agreed on the development level and the leadership style, what's next?
Well, then you need to establish clear communication norms.
Communication norms.
Yes. How often will you check in? What kind of feedback will you provide? What are the expectations for communication?
So everyone knows what to expect.
Exactly. And those norms will vary depending on the leadership style.
Right. If you're delegating to someone, you won't need to check in as often. But if you're directing someone, you'll need to be more hands-on.
Yes.
Okay, so contracting is all about creating shared understanding and clear expectations.
It is.
Now, how does all of this tie in with the one-minute manager techniques that our sources talk about?
Well, the one-minute manager techniques are a great complement to situational leadership, too.
How so?
Well, first of all, goal setting is essential.
Right.
You always diagnose someone's development level in relation to a specific goal.
So those one-minute goals provide context for assessment.
Exactly.
And then there's one-minute praisings.
Ah, yes, those are so important
Why?
because they help to build competence and commitment.
They encourage people to keep growing.
Yes. And one of our sources says, praisings, on the other hand, are the key to developing people.
Positive reinforcement is powerful.
It is.
And what about one-minute reprimands?
Well, those are a bit trickier.
How so?
Well, in the context of situational leadership, too, reprimands should only be used for people who are already operating at a high level.
Your D3s and D4s?
Yes, people who have the skills and the motivation, but whose performance has slipped.
Okay.
So it's not about correcting a lack of ability.
It's about addressing a lapse in motivation or attitude.
Exactly.
And one of our sources says, reprimands are not a training tool, but a way to deal with motivation and attitude problems.
Right.
So you wouldn't use a reprimand with someone who's still learning the ropes.
No, that would be
It
counterproductive.
would just discourage them.
Exactly.
Now, our sources also include this interesting story about an entrepreneur.
Oh, yes. I love that story.
Me too. It's a great way to see situational leadership too in action.
It is.
So tell me about this entrepreneur.
Well, she's feeling overwhelmed.
Okay.
Like she has to control everything in her business.
She's trying to do it all.
Yes. And she's not sure how to delegate effectively.
So she goes to the one-minute manager for advice.
She does.
And what does he teach her?
Well, he shows her how he leads his own team.
Which is very diverse.
It is. He's got Larry in HR,
Cindy in finance.
John in operations.
And the others.
And he uses a different leadership style with each of them.
Depending on their role, their experience, their development level.
Exactly.
So the entrepreneur sees that there's no one right way to lead.
Right.
It's all about adapting to the situation.
And she also learns about the one-minute manager's upside-down pyramid philosophy.
The upside-down pyramid.
Yes, it's a way of visualizing organizational structure.
Okay.
where leaders see their primary role as supporting their team.
Rather than controlling them.
Exactly.
And there's also this great analogy about seagull management.
Oh, yes. What a perfect image.
What is seagull management?
Well, it's when a manager swoops in, makes a lot of noise and criticism, offers a little constructive guidance,
And then flies away.
leaving a mess behind.
I think we've all experienced that at some point in our careers.
Probably.
And the entrepreneur also learns that sometimes you have to move backward through the leadership styles.
Oh, yeah, that's an important point.
Tell me more about that.
Well, sometimes a high performer,
Yeah.
someone you've been delegating to, starts to struggle.
Their performance slips.
Yes. And in those cases, you might need to adjust your style.
Okay.
Maybe you need to move from delegating to supporting.
To provide more encouragement and guidance.
Yes, or maybe you even need to go back to coaching or directing.
To give them more structure and support.
Exactly.
So it's a dynamic process.
It is. You're constantly assessing and adjusting.
And at the heart of it all is this really positive belief in people.
Yes.
That everyone has the potential to be a high performer.
That's the foundation of situational leadership, too.
And one of our sources puts it beautifully.
Oh, yes.
They say everyone is a potential high performer.
So true.
So let's bring it all together for our listener.
Okay.
What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into situational leadership too?
Well, the main message is that effective leadership is not about having a single best style.
Okay.
It's about understanding the needs of your team members.
Their competence and commitment on specific tasks.
Yes, and adapting your leadership approach to meet those needs.
So it's about being flexible.
Yes.
Being a good diagnostician.
Right.
And being able to contract effectively.
Exactly.
And by understanding these principles, our listener can become a more effective leader.
Absolutely.
You can create a more positive and productive work environment.
And help your team members reach their full potential.
So here's a final thought for you to consider.
Okay.
Think about a recent situation where you were either leading or being led.
Mm-hmm.
How might the lens of situational leadership head help you understand that situation in a new way?
That's a great question.
What different approaches might have been more effective based on the other person's development level?
Or maybe think about which of the 4 leadership styles you tend to use most naturally.
Are you a director, a coach, a supporter, or a delegator?
And are there situations where you might benefit from using a different style?
I think that's a great place to leave it.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time.
Bye.